Last week we talked about some dirt cheap running backs. Today we're going to talk about some dirt cheap wide receivers. Wide receivers who's got ADP of 200 or more. So guys are falling out of drafts, may not even be getting drafted in your startup drafts. But we got to talk about them because some of us are in those deep leagues. When it comes to wide receivers that are being valued this low, typically, more than likely, almost 100% hit rate on this, that they do not come out of the weeds and do nothing for us. I almost didn't do the video because I just looked at the list of names. I was like, it ain't happening. But then I looked at my Devy leagues that are just huge, and I realized some of us are in those deeper leagues, and even though they're not scoring tons of points or the odds are stacked against them, we still need to know about some of these cheap guys. So here are 3 cheap wide receivers to look at, and there's plenty more, and we'll probably do more videos on them. But here are 3 wide receivers we're looking at today, and the first wide receiver we're going to be looking at is Campbell of the New York Football Giants. Right now is being drafted as wide receiver 86, 205th player off the board. Again, cheap, again, free, 280p or more. He's got a 1-year deal for $4.7 million. So he is a 1-year deal on this team. He had 3 wide receiver 1 weeks last year. His career has been riddled with injuries. We see the upside with the speed. We see that. We saw it his whole career, even at Ohio State. But injuries, one after the other, his whole entire career. And this Giants offense at the wide receiver spot is just filled with jabronis who are just jockeying for position here. And some other guys you want to think of that are coming back from injury that he might be able to get some snaps over. Wan'Dale Robinson suffered an ACL injury in November, so this might take some time for him to come back. Jalen Hyatt was a 3rd-round pick, so it might take some time for him to develop. Sterling Shepard's still on the roster towards ACL in week 3. Jamison Crowder's somehow there, and then we got a bunch of other jabroni wide receivers here. So Paris Campbell might work his way into snaps, might work his way into targets, and this team proved that they can make any wide receiver productive in fantasy down the stretch last year. Maybe if he has a decent route participation rate, maybe if some targets are coming his way, maybe he can get you yards after the catch, maybe he can give you something here, but that's a wide receiver to look at. And the thing about him is that he's free. He's got some speed. We know what can happen. There's no downside because you're not even drafting him probably in some of your leagues. He's just there off the waiver wire. Moving on to our next wide receiver. He's coming back from an injury, and the offense looked a little up and down last year, mostly down than up, but maybe things can change with a new coaching staff. We're looking at Tim Patrick from the Denver Broncos. Wide receiver 91 in ADP, 213th player off the board overall. So he is dirt cheap as well. He has 2 years left on his contract with the Broncos and didn't play in 2022 due to a torn ACL. Around this time, the midsummer, people were starting to project him as a guy you're drafting in one of the last rounds of fantasy drafts, regular fantasy drafts, as a flyer that a guy could hit on the back end of your depth chart here, and then he tore his ACL, and it was kind of sad because prior to that, in 2021 and 2020, when you put those years together, he had 16 double-digit PPR scoring weeks, so he has been productive, and during that time, he's been averaging 11.7 average depth of target, so he gets targets deep downfield, which means he has the potential to get you good points on just a couple targets as long as he reels them in. And if that's happening with this offense, again, we got Marvin Mims drafted in the 2nd round. We should expect him to do something this year, but it might take some time for him to develop. Jerry Jeudy's still there. Courtland Sutton's still there. But Courtland Sutton was there when he was there. Jerry Jeudy was just now starting when he was there. So the water's a little bit murky, but with the volume in offense, AFC West schedule, there could be a chance that he does something with us. The market's saying that the odds are low because they're not paying up for him. Wide receiver 91, 213 overall, dirt cheap. But again, he's a flyer, not a sell. No one's buying him. He's a flyer. We have a new coaching staff. They're not invested in him, but they're not invested in a lot of other players. Maybe he gets some chance to prove himself, but we might be on the tail end too. but there's no sunk cost. There's no sunk cost investing in this wide receiver either. And during the offseason, he's been falling steadily and steadily down the board, even though he hasn't fell on his face yet. We're talking about David Bell of the Cleveland Browns being drafted as the wide receiver 107, 235th overall. The dream might be over, though. They drafted Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round, and they picked up Elijah Moore via trade. It might be over because the water's very murky right now, but this is also an indicator that the team wants to pass a little bit more. He was a very interesting prospect coming out of Purdue, had a high-end market share of their passing production, but again, this was a lower volume passing production, but he hasn't fallen on his face yet. He hasn't proven to us that he's bad. He just hasn't really gotten the opportunity to do what he can do. Slow productivity rate during his rookie season. The market is not liking this at all. He has fallen off the map, making him free. Things to look at here that could break his way since things are not looking good, but could go his way. Amari Cooper's not getting younger. During his time at Dallas, he played with a lot of injuries. Those could creep back up because time does that over the course of an NFL career. Elijah Moore will be in the slot. I imagine he'll do his thing. He's a good player. Donovan Peoples-Jones has been productive, but he was a 6th-round pick. And again, Cedric Tillman needs some time to develop, just like David Bell does. Bell has that playmaking ability with his ball skills. Again, he fell on his face at the combine, did not run well. Pegs as a slot receiver, which is not good when you got Elijah Moore there. This isn't a buy, sell, or anything. This is a guy that's being drafted at 235 overall. That was a lot more expensive this time last year that you could still pick up and catch on the free. Maybe you can get him as an add-on on a trade or something. But this is what the ADP is telling us. There could be a chance we could see some good things. We're only 1 year into his career. 2023 could be better, but also the odds of a rookie falling on their face this much with round 3 draft capital isn't good either. So he's not a guy you're betting on to hit, but just a free chip that you can find sitting around that you might want to add to your team if your dynasty rosters are super deep, if you're in a super deep league. We don't talk about deep leagues enough on this channel or many other channels, but sometimes you got to speculate on some of these players who are 200 some overall, and you got to look at them and see who you're going to have to pick up and hope for the best. Some of these spots you got to do that. This is one of those players who's young, who might be able to transition later down the road. But those are 3 deep flyers that we're looking at right now for our deep dynasty leagues. Your basic standard dynasty leagues are more than likely not trying to roster these guys unless you're really hurting, unless you're speculating or doing something else with your roster management. I want to hear some cheap guys you're trying to get on your roster in your startup drafts right now, who you're trying to trade for or whatnot. Sometimes those give me ideas for videos. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.